Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
You don't have to be a political journalist to appreciate one basic fact about a democracy, that the finest time in a democracy is when its parliament is functioning normally. Functioning normally means is getting its business done, which is debating, answering questions and making laws after debating them and putting them through parliamentary committees and scrutiny. That's parliament's work. Our parliament unfortunately and increasingly makes news because of what is called as pandemonium or Jutam Pechar in the Hindi press or Gandogol in some other part of the country, not for doing its own business. So when it does get something done, it is something to celebrate. Also, it is something to understand and explain, because what parliament does, the laws it passes determine our present and our future and that of our generation. So in this parliament session, we have just passed a new law. This law is called Mines and Mineral Development Bill, MMDR bill. It has a lot of amendments over an original bill passed in 1957. That was some time back. So since then, that law had not been renewed because mining is a very political business. To the extent that it may have been less political, that problem was complicated again in late 60s, early 70s in Mrs. Indira Gandhi's nationalization mania, when she nationalized almost everything. So mining became among the most controlled sectors of India. Now, if I take you back to our school textbooks, and today's school textbooks, I've checked them out, are no different. Our school textbooks will tell us that India is not particularly well endowed with a lot of minerals, or the minerals that it has are low value minerals like asbestos, coal, mica, stuff like that, iron ore, but not really high value stuff. Now, these textbooks were written by people who had the wisdom 50, 60, 70, 80 years earlier, that is from pre-independence times. Because since then, mining technologies have changed, the value of minerals has changed. Also, your ability to transport minerals has changed, and further, less and less environmentally destructive methods of extraction of minerals are coming in. Still, if you do mining, you extract minerals from ore, there will be a price to pay on the environmental side, but increasingly those technologies are improving. So in our own mindset and in our general public opinion, we have not updated our thinking. As a result, what has happened? As a result, what's happened is, and I'm quoting some of this data from our Mines Minister, Union Mines Minister Prahlad Joshi's speech in Parliament, and I'm sharing a link to the speech with you so you can watch the whole speech. He tells you that mining in India contributes only 1.3% of GDP, just 1.3% of GDP. That is very little. In South Africa, it is 7.5%. In Australia, it's 7%. You might say they have diamond and gold, but why must you say that India does not have diamond and gold? India does have diamond and gold. It's just that you need an economics, an economy, entrepreneurship, technology to go after that, to exploit that. Then if you see the mining sector in India, it produces 1 crore 10 lakh jobs, and a lot of those jobs are in disorganized sector. In fact, if you've ever driven around Jharkhand, as I have done during 2 elections, you find, particularly at night, you find rows of people on bicycles carrying coal. This is all illegally mined coal, and even the labor that you see, a lot of it is casual contract labor. There is very little per laborer or per worker production. So mines are not passing the test of profitability or productivity. There is a lot of illegality, and in the process, India, which has the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th storehouse of coal in the world, I said 3rd or the 4th or the 5th, depending on how you calculate, because sometimes you take certain quality of coal in your calculations and sometimes you don't. So let's say India has the 4th largest storehouse of coal in the world. That is, today Geological Survey of India tells us that India has 3,26,000 million tons of coal reserves. Now we know that coal is increasingly losing its sex appeal and everybody wants you to get off coal, but nobody is getting off coal in such a hurry. Even the Chinese have committed that they will end all their coal use by 2050. That is still 30 years away. So if you are looking at that time frame or even the next 15-20 years, then obviously you will be producing more and more power from renewables and from other sources, nuclear hopefully. So the dependence on coal will come down, but you will continue needing this coal. Today, the coal that India produces is worth 1,25,000 crores, again from the minister's speech. So we produce 1,25,000 crores. We have the third largest storehouse of coal in the world, and yet we import 2.5 lakh crores worth of coal every year. So our coal imports are twice as much as the value of the coal we produce, while we have the third largest storehouse of coal in the world. That tells you that something is deeply wrong with Indian mining industry. Now look at some other data, again from the minister's speech. Iron ore, India has 22,000 million tons. It is enough to last India 100-150 years, because steel is not going out of fashion very soon. So we have that much, and yet our steel industry struggles and we mine not enough of it. Chrome, we have 340 million tons. Gold, diamonds. Now estimates are that we have a lot of ores of gold, but our ore is not of good quality. So the gold mines that we had have gone to seed now. If you drive out of Bangalore, say go towards Tirupati from Bangalore, you will find Kolar gold mines or Kolar district on the way. So Kolar and Hatti are two old Indian mines which are more or less sitting in a state of disrepair. They produce some ore and some little bit of gold. The rest of the gold in India is imported. So Geological Survey of India believes that India still has 500 million tons of gold ore. Now this is gold ore, so maybe several tons will give you a little bit of gold. That's how it works. When you have very rich ore, say in parts of South Africa, Australia, then you will find more gold coming out. But when gold price goes up and technologies improve, it can also be cost effective or efficient to extract gold from Indian quality of ore. But right now nobody is prospecting for it, nobody is mining it, nobody is doing anything. So India's import of gold right now is anywhere between say 22 to 33 billion dollars a year. So let's take the ballpark figure of 30 billion dollars a year. That is 2,20,000 crores or thereabouts of import of coal of gold every year. That is about half, a little less than half for all our petroleum and gas imports. That's a lot of money, foreign exchange wasted on imported gold, when you could be producing at least some of it, if not all of it, domestically. But that is not an area that has been at all addressed in India. So the bottom line with this analysis is that India's mining wealth is underexplored, underexploited, and the mining industry is underperforming. Then mining industry is the source of all kinds of scandals and all kinds of bribery and corruption, and most importantly environmental destruction, because nothing destroys environment more than what goes into an illegal domain. So if most of the mining today is illegal, most people bribe somebody to extract a little bit more out of the mines that you have, when government has an existing law whereby if you extract anything extra from the mine, extra means from the quota that you've been given, then government can confiscate all of it. You have an existing law whereby in a mining lease area, if any law is broken, which means somebody even jumps a red light, I am giving you a notional example, I don't think there are red lights in mining areas, mining leases, but if you even jumped a red light, government could then cancel your entire mining lease or at least bring your work to a standstill. It's a lot of power with many levels of bureaucracy, and for each one it's a running ATM. It's a running ATM, then because somebody pays for it, then somebody recovers that money, and then nobody worries about the environment. Reinvestment, restoration of the soil. So all those things have festered because of an outdated law, and we thought that just because we had that law, we were underperforming. As I told you, we have mining that contributes only 1.3% of our GDP. It is very little. At the same time, we've seen environmental destruction and scandals. Remember, even under UPA 2, one of the biggest scandals where in fact some convictions have taken place, unlike say in the 2G spectrum scam, it was the coal mine allocation scandal, the coal scandal, because there was too much discretion and too little economics. So market was kept out of it, bureaucracy and politicians were there, mines were allotted based on chits, and chits were issued by somebody because somebody had deposited something someplace, not in the exchequer. But even when people bought those mines like that by paying for them on the side, there were limitations to how much they could extract, and they had to use all of it for their captive purposes. For example, if somebody was given allocated coal mines and that somebody was running a power plant, he could only use the coal that he was mining for the power plant. So he could not sell surplus coal or surplus iron ore, etc. So there were no incentive in producing more, or definitely there was no incentive to produce more legally, because you could not produce more legally. And when you produced illegally, then you have phenomena like Bellary Brothers come up. So that's why I said this was the source of a lot of problems for India. Now this one law, can one law fix everything? No, old habits die hard. But this one law addresses many key issues with this. First of all, it says that leases which have been expired in the past. See, what happens is that you might get a lease for 30 years. The lease expires, then someone else buys it from you. When someone else buys it, then all the clearances that were given with the leases now continue for 2 more years. Then that new buyer has to apply again for clearances, including say environmental clearances, which means you again have to run the gauntlet of all the Sarkar-e-Hind in Delhi, all the bhavans, and then all the rent seeking takes place. Now the new law says that once you've got clearances, even if you sell the mine, the other person, the buyer, carries on with the clearances as they were. He does not have to seek fresh clearances. Clearances now continue for the life of the mine, whatever it is. Next, the restrictions on end use of minerals for captive plants, whether power plants, steel plants. I am giving you the easier examples which are there under the existing act. Those are now gone. Today you can use 50% in your plant if you took the mines for captive use. These are captive mines, and remaining 50% you can sell in the market, no problem. You are not breaking a law. So once again, the rent seeking is gone, and there is incentive now on people with mining leases, captive mining leases, to produce more. And I will also tell you the other complex ways in which this works to our detriment, the existing law. And I have a lot of this data and detail thanks to my colleague Maushmi Dasgupta, who covers large areas of the government for us very well. And from Tenzin Zompa, who's done some other research and found me some other writings and commentaries from here and there. Now, manganese, for example, is a byproduct of iron ore production. Manganese is not needed in steel plants. So what happens is that because steel plants got iron ore mines as their captive mines, and they are not allowed to sell anything beyond what they use in their own plants. So all the manganese ore that they are producing is now lying piled up by the side of these mines and these steel plants, because they cannot sell it, they cannot refine it. Now that restriction goes. So that is the big change right now, and India is not able today to refine its own manganese ore, which is lying wasted, while it's importing oodles of manganese from South Africa and Zimbabwe. So this is really the old license quota Raj that continues in the mining sector. What this will also do is it will discourage people from hoarding mines, which means if I have a steel plant, I will apply for many more mines than I need, not because I want to mine it, I want to sit on it. I will hoard it so my competition doesn't get it, because I am worried that what will happen in future. Also, everything that can squash your competition is better. Today, now that you can sell in the market, the incentive for hoarding is gone, but I will also tell you some other changes that disincentivize hoarding. Now, within 3 years of lease, if somebody takes a mining lease now under the new law, within 3 years they have to start producing. In the past, people took mining leases and sat on them forever, squatted on them forever, because they knew this was, as I said, this was hoarding. Now, within 3 years, if you don't start producing, then these mining leases will be taken over and re-auctioned. I will give you some data. In the private sector today, of the 2,904 mining leases, that is 2,904 mining leases, 1,999, that is 2/3 are lying unused, non-working, unexploited. So basically, this is a national resource that you have now put in the warehouse. These will now be freed up, because if you don't start producing in 3 years, you lose them. So use them or lose them. Good logic. Even public sector undertakings have 297 functioning leases right now, of which 199 mines are non-functional, non-working. So this is going to change. Then the next point is exploration. In the past, when you got a license for exploration and you, by God's grace, found minerals, then you had to apply again for exploiting those minerals or mining those minerals. Now, the permission or the license for exploiting those minerals or producing those minerals will come rolled in with the exploration license. So you don't have to go back, and you have an incentive now to explore more, because who finds it keeps it. That is a good reform as I see it, because what this leads to is a seamless exploration production cycle, which wasn't there. Next point, if state governments can't auction certain mines for in a period of time. In the past, a lot of the state governments have not been able to auction mines for a long time. Now, if they can't auction for a period of time, and center in consultation with states will determine the period of this time for each kind of mines in each state, then the center can fix a date for these mines to be auctioned. Even then, if the states can't auction, then the center can auction these mines, but even if the center auctions these mines, they will turn over all of the proceeds of the auction to the state. That is center's way of sugarcoating a very bitter pill. And sure enough, the states are protesting, because we must remember that India's biggest mineral holding states are today not run by the BJP, that is Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha. They are India's 3 biggest mineral bearing states. Even Rajasthan, all of these are today run by either Congress party or its allies, or in case of Odisha, BJD, the Biju Janata Dal. So those states now see this as encroachment of their rights, but the center's view is that you are squatting on your rights, you are not using them, we are just giving you an incentive, a push now to increase mining in your states. Because center now says that look, 143 original sites had been allocated to states for auctions in the last 6 years, of which only 7 have been auctioned. So 143 were given, only 7 have been auctioned in 6 years. This is a national loss, and this is not notional, it's a real national loss, and center has the right to intervene in this. Then there is an entity called District Mineral Fund. So some percentage of the produce, every mine owner has to give over to the District Mineral Fund. This is then used to restore the place, to repair environmental damage, to carry out other welfare activities in that district. 45,000 crores have been collected under this, of which less than half has been invested. So center again has now empowered itself through this law to tell the states how to spend that money. Again, that's a contentious issue, and states are complaining about it. But the fact is that all this money has been sitting in the bank, whereas it should have been used to compensate the communities from where mineral resources are taken out. Then next point, National Mineral Exploration Trust, that's an existing trust which gets 2% of mineral royalties. So 2% of mineral royalties, that trust today has 2300 crores in its corpus, of which it has been able to award only 308 crores. What is this trust supposed to do? This trust is supposed to allocate money for further exploration of minerals, but it's been very conservative, it's not been allocating. So government has again, central government has again taken powers to allocate more, and remember, it's 2% of royalties, and royalties depend on how much mineral you are exploiting. So the more mineral you take out, the more the royalties will be, and what the government now plans to do is to set up a panel. So empanel a bunch of private mining industry players who will then be given incentives out of this fund to explore for more minerals in India. Once again, as I had mentioned to you, there are activities under today's laws. If any law is broken in a mining lease area, you can lose your mining rights. That will go. Now this will be confined to mining laws, and government has also given clarity in what is lawful and what is unlawful. So this business of, see for example, Supreme Court banned mining in many areas, say in Goa for example, or earlier in Karnataka, and then Supreme Court decides, acha ye mine khol lo, ye mine band kar do. That's all because of this outdated law. So all that will now go out of the window. PSUs which have old mining leases, they will be given extensions on a payment, which sounds fair to me. And just as a footnote, I will tell you that private sector will be able to mine all minerals except strategic minerals. What are strategic minerals? Atomic minerals, say uranium for example. For that there is a Uranium Corporation of India Limited which works under Department of Atomic Energy, and also rare earths or rare metals that we had spoken about in a full Katta Clutter just the other day. So this is now the larger picture. There is opposition from the opposition, and they have some valid points because they say government is taking over, central government is now taking over too much power. So proof of the pudding lies in the eating. We have to see how much will the government be able to deliver on this, and to keep its promise that this is not to take exaggerated powers, then to throttle states that hold minerals or punish them for electing non-BJP governments, although that is a genuine fear. I will just give you one example. I mentioned earlier about gold. India hardly produces any gold, but imports 2,30,000 crores or 2,20,000 crores worth of gold every year, 983 tons. It's a lot of gold. India is a very gold hungry country. We Indians are very gold hungry people, unfortunately. But look at silver. Until about 20 years ago, there was hardly any silver produced in India. Then what happened? Then a company called Hindustan Zinc Limited, that was a public sector company that produced zinc in Rajasthan. That was sold by Arun Shourie under Vajpayee government. It was privatized. Vedanta took it over. Today that company produces 95% of India's silver. How did that happen? That happened because while they were producing zinc, they realized that they could recover silver as a byproduct of that mining process. In the process, what was this much zinc production in India every year has now become this much every year. Now you might say this is because of whatever. You might say, oh, that's because Punjipati ki lottery lag gayi, some capitalist has made money. But the fact is, this is entrepreneurship that the government doesn't have. So I am enthusiastic about these reforms and changes. Of course, all reform is as good as the intention of those who are implementing it.